Hi there, I'm Vanessa Lee. I'm a lecturer in French at Exeter and Oriel College at the University of Oxford, and I'll be leading the tutorial today.
Hello, I'm Maddison. I study French and Linguistics at Lady Margaret Hall.
Hi, I'm Pip. I study French and Russian at Lady Margaret Hall as well.
Hi, I'm Colleen. I study French and German at Oriel.
Okay, great. So I thought perhaps we could start off with what your impressions were of the text. First I'll give a bit of a contextual introduction. So the extract we're looking at is a passage from La Virago by Suzanne Dracius, who is a Martinican writer. So Martinique is a French overseas territory in the Caribbean. So the people who live there are actually French, and they have the same rights and status as French citizens in France. So she's a French writer as well as a Caribbean writer, and she writes a lot about women's issues and the representation of Black and Caribbean femininity. So I thought this text was quite interesting to look at these different issues. So I thought maybe we could maybe talk about what your impressions were when you first read it.
So I think maybe as everyone thought, it was quite kind of a surprise when you get to the end and the motorcyclist takes off their helmet and it's got this long hair, these red lips, the long nails. Obviously, it's never said it was a woman, but we can kind of assume from the kind of traits. But all the way through, you think, oh, it's a guy, and the narrator, the main character, is thinking about this male motorcyclist. So it's interesting the way that the kind of stereotypes from male and female kind of played on. Mm-hmm. That was my kind of first impression before it was a bit more depth.
Yeah, I found it really interesting, the suspense that it builds up throughout, like you said, because you're sort of wondering who this cyclist is going to be, and then when it's finally revealed at the end. So it sort of plays with the idea of gender throughout, and the sort of a gender transgression, I suppose. So the way that this writer is described, and then sort of revelation, like I said, we're very surprised at the end, and I think, yeah, it's interesting the way sort of language and the structure builds up to that.
Yeah, I remember feeling quite irritated almost as I was reading it, thinking, oh god, it's just another case of this woman's feeling a little bit fanciful about this motorcyclist, and then it was kind of like a refreshing kind of, oh, actually, it's a woman. So that was like a fun turning on the head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you all appreciated the twist, obviously. So perhaps we could look at how this suspense, so I think you pointed that out, Colleen, the suspense builds up throughout the passage. So what kind of devices and techniques does the author use to kind of lead us to this twist?
I think the kind of speed with which you can read through it is something to do with the fact that it's kind of really informal, the register is really kind of familiar, which means, for me at least, it means I read through it quick because it's like a conversation almost. And that kind of simplicity, kind of, you go through it without thinking about anything, and then suddenly this kind of shock at the end with the kind of deep description means that you kind of shocked at the end, it's heavier at the end.
Mm-hmm.
There's an interesting kind of run of long sentences. So the one that kind of jumps out at me is the first one of the second paragraph. It's like La moto sans Lisa encore moment assumé. Ça s'élevait se découpant fugueuse et fière sur la rendue des nuages. It's very, there's no kind of breaks there where I would kind of naturally put them. So it aids the kind of suspense because, as you said, it reads quickly with these kind of long sentences throughout.
I thought the way it played with the tenses as well was really interesting. So you have passages which are past and then some which are present. And I sort of associated the passages in the past with sort of her memory of looking back and remembering these events. And it's sort of quite a personal memory. This was obviously, she was very interested in this cyclist. But then the present tense passages, when she's describing exactly how she feels, it gives a sense of sort of immediacy and sort of closeness to the reader as well. So I think, like you said, with the familiarity of the language, that also ties in then with the reader feeling quite connected, and that then helps to build up the suspense because you're sort of engaged in the passage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's that switch between tenses is also helps with that idea of familiarity of speed. Can we talk a bit more about the use of these tenses and the effect created? So you pointed out that there's the immediacy that comes with the present tense. But what else? What else is the present tense used for? Do you notice anything in particular about?
Well,
that?
it's used in the parts where like it's clear that she's talking to this motorcyclist.
Yeah.
So it's almost kind of it's not like pejorative isn't the word, but like she's angry. But she's not angry because she's interested, and it's kind of confusing, and it's kind of acidic almost because the present tense like aids this like stabbing ness of it.
Yeah, so present is used to convey dialogue, so there isn't any sort of indicators that there is a dialogue. There's no sort of the usual punctuation and so forth. So you're just depending on tense to tell that, and again that instills an idea of immediacy. Also, it allows her to be a bit more colloquial in the language she uses. Yeah. So how about the past tense? What is that used for? So you said it's descriptive. You said it was associated to memory. So that was quite an interesting
Sort
thing.
of a memory of the events as they happened, I thought, and she's obviously paying a lot of attention because, like she said, the speed passes very quickly, but she has quite a lot of detail about sort of the movements of the motorcyclist. So she's, like you said, she's sort of pretending to be angry and everything, but she's actually really hooked on watching the cyclist, who she assumes is a he. So yeah, I thought the memory seems quite sort of personal to her, like it was an important moment for her to sort of watch this person.
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely. But the past tense is also used. So if we're contrasting it with the present tense for dialogue, what's the past tense used for?
Action.
Yes, action, description. What kind of past tense does she use? Yeah.
And the imperfect and the pluperfect as well.
Yeah, but it's mainly sort of the simple past. So
Mutual.
yeah, it's used to talk about action. So did you think that was an interesting sort of play between the tenses? Could you follow that there was a shift between more descriptive, action-based narration and more sort of direct dialogue-based narration?
Yeah, because it feels like you've got someone speaking to you, like, because you can tell, you know, it's present tense, it's like almost as if she's projecting, you know, this is this, and then she turns back and it's in the action, and you know, it's like it's the kind of the same movement as you'd have in like an action film with a narrator and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, that's what I noticed, was that the kind of present tense, the dialogue of the narrator, not the dialogue, but the narrator's speech kind of frames the action in a sense. And I thought that it might have been, so we talked about how present tense is used, to do speech, but also I thought maybe to bring it into the present, like for us. So obviously it makes it kind of more relatable, but it's also kind of like a constant reminder that the kind of gender roles that kind of at play here are things that are still current, like they're still contemporary issues. Yeah. So for example, like in the opening paragraph, it's all in present, and then there's that je serai là pour appeler l'ambulance. So these are the future there. It's kind of looking. So we've got the past of the action, we've got the present of the narration, and then we've got kind of the future of the nothing's really going to change. Like whereas the gender is kind of what's up for questioning here, but looking to the future, it maybe won't change. Yeah. Okay,
that's a great point. We'll come back to that. Just as well, so do you know that present can sometimes be used to narrate as a narrative device? So you have a lot of texts in French that are written in the present tense, so there's also that sort of dimension as well. The present tense is also used to describe a lot of things, but then that comes into the immediacy. Okay, maybe we should talk about, we've looked at the effects and how perhaps the switch between tenses and registers sort of illustrates the narrator's state of mind. So what did you think of these two characters? How do they come across to you? How are they presented?
Well, I think the characters are presented in exactly the way that we think they would be.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of female, we know that the person is female, and she's, like we said, she's kind of pretending to be angry, but she's actually really interested. And then there's loads of references to kind of middle age and like ideas of masculinity. So there is not one point at which we think this could be something other than a man. So like there's Alain Stark dans Chevalier du Moyen Âge. So you've got this idea of chivalry. Chivalry has always been associated with men.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a point at which we're about to find out that it's a woman, and she gets rid of her gloves, so it's ses gants de cuir, and it's almost as if she's, you know, when people use the gloves to suggest a duel or something.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought about that. So like, kind of these images, these notions of masculinity and femininity are so well put in this piece that we have the like, really, really common feminine woman, masculine man. He's really obnoxious and you know showing off. So I think that's thrown on its head, and it's quite interesting. It is.
But is the narrator really falling into that category of sort of the womanly woman, or is she actually rejecting it?
It's like she's trying to reject it. So obviously, like when you said that she was angry, like it's like there where she's like trying to not be interested in this man because he's so like all macho. But actually, she is really drawn into it because she says she is going to be there to call the ambulance. And as we said, like the really intricate detail that she shows to the action, she is really interested, and the kind of like capriciousness of her character and the emotion is kind of like stereotypically female, like in a kind of the derogatory way that people view kind of female emotion is like, oh, they're always at extremes, and it's kind of that here. Like she's either really anti this motorcyclist, or she's really intent on like watching him, describing him.
Yeah, so there's a sort of dual personality going on. She's once attracted, but she's rejecting this sort of parade, this love dance of the motorcycle, but she's also sort of taken in by it. So that's quite an interesting thing. Yeah,
I think the anger that she sort of shows when she's sort of criticising him and what he's doing, and especially at the end when the cyclist comes up to her directly, I think it is quite a lot of sexual tension as well that is built up, and which makes it even more shocking when she finds out it's a woman. Sort of think, how is she going to react? It's completely defied our sort of expectation as a reader, which then reveals the stereotypes we sort of hold ourselves, because we have also sort of felt this shock that this person who seems to have all these masculine qualities is a woman. Is actually a woman.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about the Virago, or the motorcyclist herself. But just maybe look a bit how the character is presented, what sort of terms the narrator uses to describe.
So this motorcyclist is. I got a bit confused when looking back at it, because it is sometimes uses il, so il me fit un signe, and il me laisse refermer la bouche. So there's clear kind of masculine gender assigned to the motorcyclist, but there are other places where so la moto and la Virago, so like where the motorcycle becomes motorcyclist, and it's interesting that the author has decided to use a feminine noun there to take the place of this il, and the other lettre, so lettre trans, so like Virago, so lettre again is like kind of neutral in its.
It also dehumanises
the
person a bit, because lettre is a creature, a beast or something. So there's this idea again, which links into this idea of chivalry and being sort of a knight on top of a steed, and here the steed is the horse. Is the motorcycle. Yeah, but so you thought that, so it made you a bit confused to have those two different
Well, it was just
assigned.
interesting when kind of looking at it retrospectively that the author decided to assign feminine nouns to present the kind of part of the masculine motorcyclist. But yeah, there were parts where it was a female noun, parts where it was the male pronoun. So there was again a kind of duality to the character of the motorcyclist.
It's almost playful. Like, I really like that sentence, Elle est là, la Virago, because, you know, once you read it through it again, we realise that could mean she's there, the motorcyclist. But yeah, so it's kind of a playful thing because we don't know that it means the word, because it could mean the motorcycle, but it could mean the motorcyclist. And yeah, that duality is quite funny once you know what's happened.
Yeah, sort of the irony. So if you read it once and then you appreciate the twist without really knowing, so you assume that Virago is the motorcycle, and then once you know the twist, you read it again, and then there's all those different connotations that you can identify.
I think the use of the genders, like in French, allows the author to play with that idea of the sort of gender transgression and the sort of blurred lines, and even with the motorcycle itself, the fact that it's sort of considered sort of masculine kind of object in a way, but then it's called la Virago, which obviously relates to a woman, so even that in itself is sort of playing with our ideas immediately.
So perhaps we could look at these elements. So you talked about masculine elements that are used to identify this character. So what sort of language and vocabulary is used to describe the character more specifically?
Well, there's things like fougeoise, kind of the notion that, you know, this motorcyclist is very proud, they know that they're being cool and they're being impressive, and like that's associated with, you know, a confident male.
And again, that is used. This is written using the female gender, so it's the fougueuse et fière in the feminine. So there's that idea again of the duality. I think perhaps later on so perhaps in the last paragraph when the narrator describes l'être. So again, that's the second time we've got l'être used to describe this person, this character. But I'm thinking particularly of the second sentence of that last paragraph.
L'être de cuir, de plastique, de plexiglas et de métal. Mi-pied, yeah, I suppose it's interesting that, as we've said, like, l'être kind of dehumanises the character, but then we've got, so leather, plastic, plexiglass, it's all very kind of geared on this idea of a motorcyclist and on this kind of strength. So obviously leather is very strong kind of protection, plastic, plexiglass. So it might be that is kind of referring to this strong masculine identity that is very stereotypical.
It could also be the idea of all these materials sort of making up something. So, like I said, with l'être sort of objectifying the person, it's literally made up of these materials, and that could sort of reflect the way that the characters are made up of stereotypes. So we also objectify and dehumanise people and characters. Just the sort of use of l'être and the sort of materials really emphasises that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. How can we perhaps relate the description of this sort of odd creature to the previous paragraph where l'être is used? It's talking about un chevalier du Moyen Âge. Perhaps this idea that I was thinking particularly l'être de métal at the end correlates with this idea of a chevalier, of a knight, with the armour, the suit of armour that they wear. There's almost this idea that they're, sort of the objectifying is all around this figure of masculinity, of strength, like you pointed out. So objectifying somebody of the opposite sex or the opposite gender.
Like the same
Yeah.
image, but just sort of a modernised version of it,
Mm.
basically. So it's kind of reflects as well that things in terms of gender haven't really changed since then, in a sense, because we still have these stereotypes and ideas, just a more modern way of expressing them.
I suppose it's interesting too that we associate this kind of leather and metal to a kind of masculine character, and then when the kind of the big reveal happens, the only thing that kind of signals this big reveal is again kind of visual cues.
Yes.
Yeah, so the film mains longues, vernis de rouge, and then the lips somewhere. Yeah. So it's again playing on these things that we really visually associate with man and with woman.
Yeah.
And again, like as I said at first, we don't actually really have any answer that the motorcyclist is a woman at the end. We have to kind of guess it based on the nail varnish, the hair, things like that.
You cut, I cut out the end bit, so this is towards the end, but there's a moment at the end of this story where somebody who's been listening to the story is outraged at this, and the fact that it's a woman, so we then find out that actually the motorcyclist was a woman, but also he talks about this, the birth of a new female friendship, so then there's sort of that questioning. Okay. Well, I think that's all we've got time for, so thank you for your contributions, some very interesting discussions, and I hope it's given you a desire to read a bit more of Suzanne Dracius' work, or at least the rest of this short story. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.